If you don't want to live in a retirement home, then pack your things and get out of my house. Those words didn't come from a stranger or a passing neighbor. They came from my son. Mark stood there, framed in the doorway of my own kitchen, his jaw clenched, his voice trembling not from sorrow, but from anger. Behind him, his wife Vanessa leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching as if she were waiting for the curtain to drop on some play she had written. I remember that moment with startling clarity. The late afternoon sunlight sliced across the marble floor, illuminating the steam still rising from the dishes I'd just washed. My floral apron was damp at the waist. My hands smelled faintly of lemon soap. Ordinary things, ordinary moments, until your own child tells you you're no longer welcome in the home you built with your hands. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply turned off the tap, wiped my palms on the towel embroidered with my initials, and said softly, "All right, Mark, if that's what you want." He blinked, startled. Perhaps he expected screaming, maybe even begging, but the years had already drained me of that kind of noise. I'm glad you're here. Give this story a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far truth can travel, because the one I'm about to tell you tore through my family like a wildfire that refused to die. That house, the narrow Victorian on Lyon Street, wasn't just four walls to me. It was every hour I'd ever sewn a hem or a veil in my little studio, every callus that formed on my hands from years of labor, 32 years of custom wedding gowns, every stitch a prayer for other women's happiness while mine slowly unraveled. When Adrian, my husband, passed away 13 years ago, the mortgage had been paid in full. I thought that meant safety, family, continuity. I didn't realize that safety could become a weapon when placed in the wrong hands. Vanessa's voice sliced through the silence. "It's not that we don't care, Evelyn," she said, her tone honeyed with hypocrisy. "We just think it's better for you to be in a place with people your age. You'll have activities, companionship, nurses." I turned slowly toward her. "You mean you'll have the house?" She laughed, pretending to be wounded. "That's not fair." No, I thought, it wasn't. Mark rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. He still had the same nervous habit he'd had as a boy when caught lying. "Mom, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. We'll visit all the time." That sentence, "we'll visit all the time," has a cruel kind of beauty. It's the lie people tell to soften betrayal. My heart should have been breaking, but instead, it felt like something inside me was finally snapping clean, like an old thread pulled too tight for too long. I took a breath and said, "All right then, I'll pack my things." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Even Vanessa's smirk faltered. Mark opened his mouth as if to say something else, but nothing came. He just stepped aside. Upstairs, in the tiny back bedroom, they'd given me a room smaller than the storage closet. I opened my wardrobe and began folding my clothes, one by one, slowly, carefully. I packed my navy cardigan, my worn blouses, the silk scarf Adrian once gave me on our 10th anniversary. Every piece of fabric felt like another goodbye. Then I opened the wooden box I kept at the bottom of the dresser, the one with the old photographs. Adrian and me on our wedding day, in a simple cream dress I'd sewn myself. Mark at 5 years old, holding a kite. My mother, in her garden back in Marseille, smiling beneath the sundae. I traced each face with my fingertip, and I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because sadness had finally run out of space in me. When the suitcase was full, I zipped it up, took one last look at the room, its bland beige walls, its air thick with the scent of laundry detergent and silence, and walked downstairs. Mark and Vanessa sat on the sofa, whispering. The television played quietly in the background, showing some talk show about home renovations. How poetic. When the doorbell rang, Mark sighed. "Probably the realtor," he muttered, rising to answer it. But when he opened the door, the color drained from his face. A sleek black limousine waited at the curb. A chauffeur in a tailored suit stepped out and opened the back door. Out stepped Julian Davenport. He was older now, silver hair combed neatly back, a navy overcoat, eyes as sharp and kind as I remembered. I hadn't seen him in over 2 decades, not since Adrian's funeral. Back then, he had stood quietly by my side, the man who had been both my husband's best friend and, I suspected, the only one who had ever truly understood me. "Evelyn," he said, his voice warm, steady. "Are you ready?" Mark's mouth opened, but no sound came. Vanessa's expression curdled into disbelief. I lifted my suitcase and smiled faintly at my son. Thank you for everything, Mark. The house is yours now. Then I stepped past him, past the threshold of the home I had built and he had taken. The limousine door closed with a soft click, sealing the moment like a photograph. As we drove away, I looked through the rear window. My son stood on the porch, small, motionless, framed by the very house that had once been mine. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of something lifting. Freedom, I realized, doesn't always come wrapped in joy. Sometimes it arrives in the silence that follows destruction. Julian sat beside me in the car, keeping a respectful distance. The faint scent of leather and cedarwood filled the air. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. I looked at my trembling hands on the suitcase handle. "I think so," I said, though my voice betrayed me. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel heartbroken, but instead, I feel empty." "Emptiness," Julian said, "is just space waiting to be filled again." I turned to look out the window. The city blurred by buildings, strangers, lights. It felt like the world had already forgotten the woman who once stood at her kitchen sink and lost everything. But as the limousine climbed toward the glittering skyline, a thought crossed my mind, small, steady, defiant. They think they've taken my life from me, but what they don't know is that they've just set it free. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, if you've ever had to start again when you thought your story was over, then stay with me. Because what happened after that day on Lion Street will show you sometimes the worst endings are only the beginning. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime, and I stepped into a world so far removed from the one I had left behind that it made my heart ache. Julian's penthouse stretched across the 42nd floor of a glass tower overlooking the San Francisco Bay. From here, the city shimmered like a painting, the bridge glowing in the distance, the fog curling across the water like a living thing. For a moment, I couldn't move. I'd spent decades sewing silk gowns for other women who lived in apartments like this, high above the noise, untouched by the smell of detergent or the ache of bills unpaid. Julian set my suitcase down gently by the marble staircase. "You'll stay here as long as you need," he said. "No arguments." I wanted to speak to tell him I couldn't possibly accept, that I had no right, but my throat felt tight. All I could manage was, "It's too much." He smiled faintly. "It's not charity, Evelyn. It's long overdue kindness." He led me through the living room. Everything gleamed glass, brass, polished wood. But beneath the elegance, there was warmth. A vase of fresh lilies by the window. Books stacked on the coffee table, some still open. A framed photograph of a much younger Julian and my late husband, Adrian, smiling on the deck of a sailboat. The sight made my chest tighten. I walked closer and traced the edge of the photo. "You two were unstoppable," I said softly. Julian nodded. "For a time, yes. Adrian was a visionary, but he was reckless. You were the one who steadied him." "He wouldn't have agreed with that," I murmured. "He didn't have to. We both knew." He paused, then added gently, "He left things complicated, Evelyn. When he died, his affairs weren't as clean as they looked." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Julian didn't answer right away. "Let's sit. You need tea first." In the dining room, a panoramic view of the city stretched before us. Julian poured chamomile tea, my favorite, into porcelain cups. I watched the steam rise and disappear. "How did you know I'd need help today?" I finally asked. "I didn't," he said. "I was driving down Lion Street after a meeting. I saw you standing outside with that suitcase. When I saw your son's face at the door," he sighed, looking away, "I knew." I pressed my palm against my cup. "He threw me out," I whispered, the words tasting bitter. "My own son." Julian's voice softened. "Then you've given him the last thing he'll ever take from you, your forgiveness." I looked up sharply. "Forgiveness?" He held my gaze, steady and kind. "Evelyn, forgiveness isn't surrender. It's freedom. You'll see." But I didn't want to see. Not yet. All I felt was loss, the hollow echo of a life dismantled piece by piece. Later, he showed me the guest suite upstairs, a wide, sunlit room with cream curtains, a balcony overlooking the water, and a bed so soft I almost didn't want to sit on it. "This is yours," he said, "for as long as you want it." My house was small, I murmured, but it was mine. Every tile, every picture frame. I cleaned it every morning. Even the walls knew me. Julian's expression softened. You built a life out of love and labor. That doesn't disappear because someone threw you out. It just moves with you. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Rest tonight. Tomorrow. We'll talk about the future. When he was gone, I sank onto the bed. My body trembled from exhaustion. I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I stared out at the city lights glittering, indifferent, and for the first time in years, I let the tears come. It wasn't grief that filled me that night. It was revelation. I thought about the moment Mark told me to leave, the way Vanessa's smile had curled with satisfaction, the way I had packed my life into a suitcase without protest. All these years, I had mistaken silence for strength, obedience for peace. But strength isn't quiet submission, it's endurance until the moment you rise. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, a strange calm settled over me. I stood on the balcony, the wind cool against my face, the bay stretching endlessly below. The city breathed beneath my feet alive, relentless, unapologetic. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I could be like it. Unbreakable. Unapologetis. Alive. The next morning, I found Julian in his study. He was reading through an old, leather-bound folder embossed with a familiar logo. Davenport and Morrow Ventures, the company my husband had built with him decades ago. I froze at the doorway. Where did you get that? He looked up slowly. From the archive, Evelyn. There's something you need to know about your husband's estate. My pulse quickened. What are you talking about? He motioned to the chair across from him. Sit down. I did. The air thick with something I couldn't yet name dread, maybe. Or hope. Julian laid a single paper in front of me. A legal document with my husband's signature at the bottom. Adrian left you 40% of his company's shares, he said quietly. They were never transferred. On paper, they still belong to you. I stared at him. That's not possible. Mark told me everything went to him. Julian's eyes darkened. Then your son lied. The words sliced through the air like a blade. And in that moment, as the morning sun flooded the room and my world tilted on its axis, I realized the betrayal that had started in my kitchen was only the surface of something far deeper, a web of deceit that began long before that Sunday afternoon on Lyon Street. The first thing I felt was disbelief. The second was rage. Julian's words hung in the air, heavy as thunderclouds. They still belong to you, Evelyn. 40%. It was never legally transferred. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the document from his desk. There it was, my husband's signature, bold and confident, beside my name, written in neat, cursive. My husband, Adrian Moreau, the man who had built empires out of charm and numbers, had left a piece of that empire to me, and my son had stolen it. How long? I asked quietly, staring at the signature. Julian leaned back in his chair. At least 10 years. Maybe more. It appears your son forged your authorization to take control of the shares. We only discovered it because his company recently merged with a new investment group, and the lawyers cross-checked ownership. I received a courtesy call. I blinked, trying to make sense of the words. 10 years. 10 years of lies. 10 years of calling me Mom, bringing me flowers on birthdays, pretending everything he owned was built by his own hands, when all along, it was built on mine. Why didn't I see it? I whispered. Why didn't I ask? Julian Sighed. Because you trusted him. I looked out the window at the sprawling city below. Trust, the word felt foreign now, hollow. That evening, I sat alone in the guest room, surrounded by silence. I tried to remember the exact moment Mark began to change, the moment my son became a stranger. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, subtle, like a crack forming in a foundation, invisible until the house finally collapses. It began 3 years ago. Back then, I had my own small apartment, a 2-bedroom unit above a bakery in Pacific Heights. The rent was modest, the walls smelled faintly of sugar and cinnamon, and the mornings were peaceful. Mark used to visit every weekend, his children in tow, filling the air with laughter. Vanessa would bring pastries and talk about how lonely I must feel living alone. One Saturday, they came with an idea. Mom, Mark said, taking my hand across the kitchen table. Vanessa and I have been talking. The kids adore you, and we worry about you being alone. Why don't you move in with us? Vanessa smiled, that polished, glossy smile she wore like lipstick. You'd have your own room, of course, And it'd make us so happy to have family under one roof. You deserve that, Evelyn. I remember feeling touched, seen, needed. Then came the second suggestion. Actually, Mark said, scratching the back of his neck, we're expanding the business a second branch of the agency, but we're short on capital. If you sold your apartment, it would be like a family investment. You'd be part of it. He'd said those words so gently, like an invitation to something noble. A family investment. I'd spent my life believing in family, so I did what I thought a mother should do. I sold the apartment, handed over every dollar, $240,000, and moved into their home on Lion Street. I didn't ask for receipts. I didn't ask for contracts. I trusted my son. Now, in Julian's penthouse, I could see every lie laid bare. The investment had disappeared. The business was no longer even his. It had been absorbed, merged, and repackaged under a new name, Lyric Consulting Group. And in that process, my name, my rights, had vanished. I called Julian's lawyer, Amelia Chen, the next morning. Her voice was calm, efficient, razor sharp. Mrs. Moreau, she said, the documents confirm your ownership. Your son used your signature without authorization. That's criminal forgery and fraud. If you wish, we can press charges immediately. Charges? I repeated. The word felt heavy on my tongue. Yes, but it's your decision. Once we begin, there's no undoing it. He hesitated. He's my son. Then he should have remembered that before stealing from you. Her tone was kind but firm. It was the first time in years someone had spoken to me as if I still mattered. That night, Julian made dinner, roasted salmon and lemon risotto. We ate quietly, the clinking of cutlery the only sound between us. Finally, I said, I can't believe I raised someone capable of that. Julian set down his fork. Evelyn, we're all capable of terrible things when we're desperate. But Mark's desperation wasn't for survival, it was for power. I stared into my glass of wine. He used to say I was his compass, that he'd never make a decision without calling me first. And when did that stop? I thought for a moment. When Vanessa entered his life, she made him feel like he could outgrow his roots. Julian's voice softened. Some people mistake love for control. She's one of them. I met his gaze. And what about him? Julian hesitated. He mistook control for love. The truth of that hit me so hard I nearly dropped my fork. After dinner, I stood by the window, watching the lights ripple across the bay. Below me, the city hummed restless, alive, merciless. For so long, I'd been afraid of confrontation. I thought silence was strength, patience was grace. But silence had only made me invisible. Julian joined me by the glass. His reflection shimmered beside mine. You have two choices, Evelyn, he said quietly. You can walk away, or you can take back what's yours. I turned to him. And if I do? His smile was faint, almost proud. Then you'll become someone they never saw coming. I nodded slowly, feeling something stir inside me. Not anger, not grief, but something older, stronger. Resolve. For the first time in years, I felt my spine straighten, my heart steady. They wanted to bury me, I said softly, watching the fog roll over the water. They forgot I'm a seed. The next morning, the city was still shrouded in a thin veil of fog when Julian drove me to Amelia Chen's office. The air smelled faintly of salt and rain, a scent that had always meant renewal to me, even when my world was crumbling. Amelia's firm occupied a sleek corner building in the financial district, all glass and steel, where the walls themselves seemed to hum with quiet power. The receptionist greeted us with that professional calm, unique to people who deal with billion-dollar problems before breakfast. Mrs. Moreau, Mr. Davenport, Miss Chen will see you now. Inside, Amelia rose from behind her desk. She was younger than I expected, early 30s, maybe with jet black hair cut blunt at the jaw and a calm, unflinching confidence that made her seem older. Her tailored navy suit looked sharper than most knives. Mrs. Moreau, she said warmly, shaking my hand. Julian has already filled me in. I've reviewed the preliminary documents, but you should hear this directly from me. She motioned for me to sit, sliding a stack of files across the desk, thick, heavy, the kind that carried both answers and pain. The first page bore my husband's signature again, Adrian L. Moreau, beside the company seal of Davenport and Moreau Ventures. Amelia tapped her pen on the page. This is the original shareholder agreement. As of the time of Mr. Moreau's death, He owned 60% of the company. 40% was yours. Upon his passing, your portion was to be retained in your name, not transferred. She opened another folder, pulling out a scanned document. But this, she said, is the form your son filed 2 months after the funeral. It transfers all of your shares into his personal trust. See the signature? I looked closer. My name, Evelyn Moreau, scrawled across the line in ink that wasn't mine. The letters curved wrong, the M crooked, the Y slanted. A forgery. Amelia didn't sugarcoat it. He faked your consent, filed it through a private notary, and used those shares as collateral for his business expansion loan. In plain terms, your son used your inheritance to fund his ambitions. My throat tightened. And nobody questioned it? Not at the time. He presented the paperwork neatly. The notary he used has since been arrested for fraud in other cases. I've already confirmed that. She pushed another document toward me. This one, a printout of bank transactions. He sold a portion of those shares 3 years ago. Net gain? $1.8 million. None of which reached your account. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My pulse roared in my ears. My son. Julian's hand came to rest gently over mine. He's not the boy you raised anymore, Evelyn. I know, I whispered. But it still hurts to see it written down. Amelia's tone softened. You've been wronged, Mrs. Moreau, both legally and morally. We can file a claim for restitution and damages. Forgery of this nature is criminal. But it's your choice how far you want to go. How far? I echoed. She folded her hands. If we move forward, he could lose everything. His business, his assets, his reputation, and he might face prison time for falsifying documents. The words landed heavy between us. Outside her office window, the fog began to lift, revealing the golden shimmer of the Bay Bridge in the distance. It felt like a metaphor too obvious to ignore. The truth always emerges, no matter how deeply it's hidden beneath clouds of deceit. What happens if I do nothing? I asked quietly. Amelia hesitated. Then the world remains as it is. He keeps the money, the power, the illusion. You keep the silence. I looked down at the forged papers again, at the life my husband had left me, erased by the child I had birthed. No, I said, my voice low but steady. Not this time. Julian glanced at me. Are you sure? I turned to him, and for the first time, my words didn't tremble. For 40 years, I've spent my life mending other people's seams. It's time I tear something open. Amelia smiled slightly, not the smile of victory, but of recognition. Then we'll proceed. I'll need your signature on these affidavits to authorize a formal audit. Once we have confirmation, I'll file the civil claim. My pen didn't hesitate. As the ink met paper, I felt something inside me click like a lock turning, releasing a door I hadn't dared to open for years. Freedom, justice, power, maybe all three. After the meeting, Julian and I stopped at a cafe near Union Square. I stirred sugar into my coffee absent-mindedly, watching the steam rise like ghosts. I still don't know how to feel, I murmured. I hate him for what he did, but part of me still sees the little boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the park. Julian stirred his own drink. You can love someone and still hold them accountable, Evelyn. One doesn't cancel the other. I thought about that as we sat there. The noise of the city moving around us, a violinist playing near the fountain, a child laughing, a woman in red hurrying by. Life was moving, unstoppable, unaware of the war that had just begun. When we returned to the penthouse, Amelia's assistant had already emailed a digital copy of everything I'd signed. I scrolled through the pages slowly, my hands trembling slightly. Near the end, something caught my eye, a line of text buried in the legal section. Transfer of shares executed on July 8th, witnessed by Vanessa Hart. Vanessa. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. She wasn't just complicit, she had been part of it from the beginning. So it wasn't just Mark who betrayed me. It was both of them. A husband and wife united not by love, but by greed. And for the first time, I didn't feel sorrow. I felt clarity cold, absolute clarity. That night, I walked out onto the balcony again. The fog had lifted completely now, and the stars shone like scattered shards of glass across the sky. Julian joined me quietly, setting a blanket over my shoulders. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I'm thinking," I said softly, "that when a mother's love is betrayed, What's left behind isn't weakness, it's fire. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then let it burn, Evelyn. Let it light the way home. And as the city lights glittered below, I knew I had already begun to reclaim everything they'd stolen, not just the money, or the shares, or the house, but myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my son's handwriting where mine should have been a crude imitation, a theft dressed as love. The city outside glittered as if mocking me. Each light in the distance was another reminder that life went on, indifferent to the pain of one aging woman who'd finally learned the truth about her family. At dawn, I gave up pretending to rest. I made tea, wrapped myself in a shawl, and sat on the balcony. Below, the streets were wet with mist, the Bay Bridge half hidden behind a drifting wall of fog. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Mark, or Vanessa, or the house on Lion Street. I was thinking about myself, about the girl I once was before I became everyone else's foundation. I used to believe that women like me were born to hold things together, husbands, homes, businesses, sons. But holding things together doesn't make you whole, it just makes you tired. By the time the sun rose, something inside me had shifted, not broken, transformed. When Julian came downstairs at 8, I was already dressed. "You're up early," he said, surprised. "I didn't sleep." He frowned. "Nightmares?" "No," I said. "Clarity." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Good. You'll need that." We drove to a quiet part of town, where his foundation offices were an elegant old brick building overlooking the marina. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar and ink. The receptionist greeted me by name, as if I belonged there. Julian led me into a conference room filled with sunlight and opened a folder on the table. "I want to show you something," he said. Inside were architectural plans, photos, reports, projects his foundation had funded, scholarships for single mothers, business grants for older women. "You could help us," he said. "You've spent your life building. Why stop now?" I laughed softly. "You want me to work?" He smiled. "I want you to live." Something about that simple statement felt like oxygen. Over the next few days, I found myself returning to the foundation daily. I began helping with small things, reviewing applications, organizing files, suggesting outreach programs for women who'd lost everything. It wasn't charity, it was reclamation. Every hour I gave, there was an hour taken back from regret. One afternoon, Julian found me standing by a window, reading a handwritten note from one of the applicants, a widowed seamstress from Oakland who'd written, "I just need one chance to start again." I smiled faintly. "That was me once," I said. Julian's gaze softened. "No, Evelyn, that was you. This is who you are." He handed me a document. "Sign this," he said. It was an appointment form. Position: Director of Women's Empowerment Initiatives. Salary: modest but dignified. I looked up, startled. "Julian, I can't." "Yes, you can. The board already approved it." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Why are you doing this for me?" He shrugged lightly. "Because you've spent your life giving away your power. It's time someone handed it back." That night, I stood before the mirror in my new office, a mirror that reflected not the worn-down mother who'd been discarded, but the woman who had once dreamed of owning her own atelier, who had once danced barefoot in her kitchen to Edith Piaf. I barely recognized her. But I liked her. When I returned to the penthouse, Julian was sitting by the piano with 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to me. "To new beginnings," he said. I raised my glass. "And to endings that make room for them." The next morning, I called Amelia. "I want to move forward," I told her. "With everything." Her tone sharpened with approval. "Good. I've already drafted the first motion. Once it's filed, the court will freeze your son's accounts until ownership is clarified." "Do it," I said without hesitation. She paused. "Evelyn, you're aware of what that means. It will go public. He'll know you're behind it." I exhaled slowly. Let him. That evening, as I watched the lights flicker over the bay, I thought about the years I had spent waiting for Mark to remember me, waiting for gratitude, waiting for kindness. But children raised on entitlement never return to humility until something takes it from them. I wasn't the same mother anymore. I wasn't the woman who begged, who endured, who stayed silent. The papers had been signed. The first shots fired. I was at war. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of losing. I chose the restaurant carefully, a quiet place overlooking the Embarcadero, elegant but not ostentatious. The kind of place where people came to pretend their lives were intact while signing their divorces or settling business wars behind polite smiles. Mark and Vanessa arrived 5 minutes late. That, of course, was deliberate. Power games and small gestures, they learned them from each other. I watched them walk in through the glass wall. Mark, thinner than I remembered, wearing a suit too expensive for the son who'd once borrowed lunch money from me. Vanessa, wrapped in a white silk dress that said money and a smile that said victory. When they saw me, both froze for a fraction of a second, perhaps expecting me to look broken, humbled. Instead, I sat tall, wearing a deep navy dress that matched my calm, silver hair brushed loose around my shoulders and the same pearl earrings Adrian had given me when Mark was born. The hostess led them to my table. Vanessa spoke first, voice sugar-coated and venomous. "Evelyn," she said sweetly, "you look well. How are you? Adjusting?" I smiled faintly. "To freedom? Surprisingly well." Her smirk faltered. Mark cleared his throat. "Mom, I wish you'd picked a different place. This feels dramatic." "Does it?" I said softly. "Then perhaps it's appropriate." We ordered wine. The silence that followed was thick enough to slice. The waiter poured, bowed, and disappeared like a shadow. Finally, Mark sighed. "Mom, look, I don't know what Julian told you." I interrupted, my tone sharp as glass. "Julian didn't tell me anything. Documents did." He blinked. "Documents?" I reached into my bag and laid an envelope on the table. Inside were photocopies of everything: the forged signature, the transaction history, the notarized will. I didn't slide them across, I let him do the reaching. He hesitated, then pulled the papers out. The moment his eyes met the fake signature, his face drained of color. Vanessa leaned forward, pretending confusion. "What is this?" "Evidence," I said evenly, "of theft, of forgery, of betrayal." Mark looked up, panicked. "Mom, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think," I said, cutting him off. "You stole from me. You forged my name and used it to build a life that never belonged to you. You've lied for years. And for what? Money? Status?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Evelyn, you act like he's a criminal. It's a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I turned my gaze to her, my voice calm but sharp enough to draw blood. "You were the witness on the forged transfer, Vanessa. Don't insult both of us." Her lips parted. She hadn't expected that. Mark buried his face in his hands. "Mom, please, don't do this here." "This is exactly where I'll do it," I said. "You humiliated me in my own kitchen. You told me to pack my things and get out of my own house. So, tell me, Mark, how does it feel to be the one cornered now?" He looked up slowly, his eyes wet, voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could fix it before you ever found out." "Fix it?" I whispered. "You call erasing me from my husband's legacy fixing it?" The waiter reappeared with our entrees. No one touched the food. The wine tasted like ash on my tongue. For a moment, none of us spoke. The city lights outside shimmered through the window, reflecting against the silver cutlery like 1,000 tiny mirrors, all of them showing the same truth. We were no longer a family, just strangers bound by blood and betrayal. When I finally spoke again, my voice was low but steady. "You know, I used to think love was unconditional, that a mother could forgive anything. But that's not true. Love has limits. Forgiveness has limits. And you've reached them both." Mark's breath caught. "Mom, please, No," I said, rising from my seat. "You don't get to beg now. You made your choice when you forged my name. When you let that woman," I nodded toward Vanessa, "convince you that I was a burden instead of a blessing." Vanessa's cheeks flushed red. "Watch your tone, Evelyn." I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "If I were you, dear, I'd start watching your back." Her eyes widened. "Is that a threat?" I smiled. "No, that's a promise." When I turned to leave, Mark reached out. "Where are you going?" I looked at him, truly looked, and saw not my son, but a man I no longer recognized. "Home," I said simply. "A real one this time." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Vanessa hiss under her breath. "She won't dare take this to court." And then Mark, voice hollow, answered, You don't know my mother." Outside, the night air felt electric. The wind off the bay whipped through my hair, sharp and cold, but I didn't flinch. Julian's car was waiting by the curb. As I slid into the seat, he turned to me. "Well?" he asked quietly. I exhaled. He looked at me like a stranger. "But that's all right. Sometimes you have to let people lose you before they learn who you are." Julian smiled faintly. "So what now?" I stared out the window, at the lights of the bridge arching over dark water. "Now," I said, "we begin." Because what my son didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this dinner wasn't confrontation. It was warning. And the storm that followed would change everything. 2 days after that dinner, I woke up before dawn to the sound of rain against the windows. The city below looked washed clean streets, glistening like wet glass, the air sharp with the smell of renewal. But inside me, there was only stillness, the kind that comes right before the next wave hits. Julian found me in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. He didn't say anything at first, just placed a small envelope on the table between us. "What's this?" I asked. "Something you need to see." He hesitated before speaking again. "I asked my investigator to dig deeper into Mark's finances, not for vengeance, Evelyn, but to protect you. What he found?" His jaw tightened. "You'd better look yourself." I slid the photographs from the envelope. For a moment, the world narrowed to the images in my hands. Vanessa, entering a hotel, her coat half-buttoned, her hair down. Another photo, her leaving a high-rise apartment downtown, her hand locked with a man I'd never seen before, younger, broad-shouldered, tattoos curling up his arm like vines. The next photo froze my breath. The two of them kissing in a parking garage, her fingers hooked in his jacket. Julian's voice cut through the silence. "His name is Ethan Lane, fitness trainer, works at a luxury gym in Soma. Been seeing Vanessa for over a year." I stared at the photos again, bile rising in my throat, not from jealousy or shock, but from the raw injustice of it. "She destroyed my family for him," I said quietly. Julian nodded. "And it's worse than that. She used your money to do it." He opened a folder, sliding out bank statements marked with Vanessa's name. "Your heirloom jewelry, the brooch, the amethyst ring, the gold locket, sold through a downtown jeweler. Total payout, $28,000. The funds went straight into a joint account under Vanessa Hart and Ethan Lane." I felt the room tilt. "She sold my mother's jewelry?" Julian met my eyes. "Yes." The investigator confirmed it. "Same pieces, same store, same week you moved into their house." I pressed a hand to my chest, struggling to breathe. "She's been planning this for years." "She has," Julian said softly. "And she's not done yet." He pulled out one more photo, a printed screenshot of an email exchange, Vanessa to her lawyer. "Once Evelyn's lawsuit hits, we'll shift everything to Ethan's account. Mark doesn't need to know." I stared at the words until the ink blurred. "Mark knows?" I whispered. Julian hesitated. "He found out 6 months ago, confronted her. She cried, promised to stop. He forgave her." "Forgave?" The word exploded out of me. "She steals from me, cheats on him, and he forgives her?" Julian's expression darkened. "He's afraid of her. She's been threatening to take the children if he ever leaves. She has control, Evelyn, financial, emotional, everything." That night, I couldn't sit still. I walked from room to room, my thoughts circling like crows. Every sound, the wind, the creak of the floor seemed to echo her laughter, her cruelty. I went to the balcony, the rain still falling in fine silver threads. I gripped the railing until my hands ached. I had spent a lifetime believing my strength came from endurance, from forgiveness. But I realized now, endurance without boundaries isn't strength, it's surrender. "No more." I turned back inside, grabbed my phone, and called Amelia. "It's time," I said. "We go after both of them." She didn't sound surprised. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've already prepared a motion to add Vanessa Hart as a co-defendant. Fraud, theft, conspiracy. Once the court sees this evidence, they'll freeze her accounts too." "Do it," I said. "Evelyn," she added softly. "This will be public. Her name, your son's name, the children. I've already lost my family once," I said. "Losing their illusions is nothing." The next morning, Julian joined me on the terrace, holding 2 steaming mugs. "Sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet." He handed me a cup. "Then drink." You'll need your strength. War looks good on you, but it still requires fuel. I smiled faintly despite myself. War? Is that what you think this is? Julian's gaze was steady. You've been quiet for years, Evelyn. The moment you decided to speak, it became war. At noon, Amelia called. The filings are in. They'll be served by tomorrow. I exhaled, my hand shaking as I lowered the phone. It was happening. The train had left the station, and there was no stopping it now. Hours later, Julian's investigator sent one final update, not about money or legalities this time, but something smaller, almost poetic in its cruelty. Vanessa and Ethan had matching tattoos, small gold initials hidden behind their wrists. EM, Ethan, and me. I laughed when I read it, a strange, hollow sound that filled the penthouse like shattered glass. Julian appeared in the doorway. What is it? I turned the photo toward him. She marked herself for him, like a trophy, like a fool. He didn't smile. People like her always do. They think forever is something they can buy. I stared at the inked initials one last time before setting the photo down. No, I said quietly. Forever is something I'm about to take back. Because while Vanessa had been busy engraving her lies into skin, I had been engraving mine into law. And when the judgment came, it wouldn't be made of words. It would be written in ruin. The morning of the hearing dawned in cold silver light. San Francisco was still half asleep when Amelia's car arrived to pick me up. The streets shimmered under a thin veil of fog. The city looked like it was holding its breath. Julian insisted on coming with me, despite my protests. You don't go into battle alone, he said, buttoning his coat. Not anymore. The courthouse loomed ahead like an ancient temple gray stone, echoing hallways, a smell of old paper and disinfectant. Inside, everything was too bright, too clean, as if the place were trying to wash away the filth of human lies with polish and light. Vanessa was already there. She stood in the corridor in a beige dress that screamed innocence, hair tied back in a loose knot, pearl earrings just like mine, a cruel little mimicry. Beside her was Mark, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow, his tie crooked. When his gaze met mine, something inside me ached, not with pity, but with recognition. He looked like a man drowning quietly in the mess he'd created. Vanessa, on the other hand, looked untouched. When I walked past, she smiled, slow and venomous. Good morning, Evelyn. You look composed. I didn't expect that. I smiled faintly. You should stop underestimating older women. We've outlived wars stronger than you. Her eyes flashed, but before she could retort, Amelia appeared beside me, every inch the predator in heels. Let's not waste breath, she murmured. We'll speak in the courtroom. Inside, the air was still. Judge Mendez, a sharp-eyed woman with streaks of silver in her hair, presided from her high desk. She was known for her zero tolerance for theatrics, which, as I soon realized, was bad news for Vanessa's performance. The clerk read the case title aloud. Evelyn Brooks versus Mark Brooks and Vanessa Hart, charges of fraudulent transfer, asset misappropriation, and conspiracy. Vanessa flinched at the sound of her own name paired with mine. It was the first time she'd ever stood on equal footing, and she hated it. Amelia rose first. Her voice was measured, steady, and surgical. Your Honor, my client was deceived into relinquishing her rightful inheritance through a forged signature. The defendants not only profited but used these stolen funds to finance personal luxuries and illicit activities, as documented in the exhibits before you. She gestured to the screen. Photo after photo appeared Vanessa in the hotel lobby. Vanessa with Ethan, the jewelry sale receipts, the falsified accounts. Every flash of evidence was another nail driven neatly into their coffin. When it was Vanessa's turn, her lawyer, a man who looked like he'd been carved out of sweat and desperation, stood shakily. My client, he began, was under significant emotional distress. Her actions were influenced by Mrs. Brooks's hostility and… Hostility? Amelia's voice cut through like a blade. You mean the woman who was forced out of her own home, who cooked and cleaned for her abusers? The judge lifted a hand. Counselors, keep this civil. Vanessa spoke then, her voice trembling just enough to seem rehearsed. I never meant to hurt Evelyn. She's twisting everything. I cared for her like my own mother. I laughed. Out loud. It wasn't planned. It just broke out of me, sharp and cold, echoing through the chamber. Like your own mother? I said. Then heaven help your real one. The courtroom went still. Vanessa's mask cracked. A flicker of fury twisted her mouth before she caught herself. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Brooks, control yourself." "I'm perfectly controlled, Your Honor," I said evenly. "But truth shouldn't be forced to whisper while lies take the stand." When the evidence reached the part about the children, the photos of Peter waiting alone outside school, the reports from teachers, even the judge's face softened. Vanessa's lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, those matters are private." "They stopped being private," Amelia said, "the moment your client used 2 minors as leverage in a fraud." Mark looked up then, tears welling. His lips moved, but no sound came out. For the first time, I saw him not as a villain, but as a broken boy trying too late to fix the fire he'd lit. Still, compassion didn't mean forgiveness. When his turn to speak came, he stood shakily. "Your Honor, I made mistakes. I thought I could manage the money, that it was all under control. But I didn't know. I didn't know how deep she—" Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. "Don't you dare blame me." "Order," the judge barked. Mark's voice cracked. "You ruined everything, Vanessa. You turned me against my mother." Her reply was a hiss. "You did that yourself, Mark. You were weak long before I ever met you." The words sliced through the room. Silence fell heavy after them, the kind that always follows truth, raw and cruel. The hearing stretched for hours, but the outcome was decided long before the gavel fell. Judge Mendez ruled, "This court finds sufficient evidence of fraud and coercion. All assets obtained through the illegal transfer will be frozen, pending restitution. Custody of the children will be reviewed immediately." Vanessa went pale. Her lawyer dropped his pen. Mark slumped into his chair, whispering, "Mom, I'm sorry, but I was too tired for words." The apology floated past me like smoke too late to catch, too empty to matter. When the session ended, Amelia touched my arm. "You won, Evelyn." "No," I said quietly. "I just stopped losing." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear. A fragile blue stretched over the city. Vanessa exited the courthouse, flanked by her lawyer, cameras flashing as reporters swarmed. Mark trailed behind her, his face gray and lost. Julian opened the car door for me, his voice low. "You were magnificent." I sank into the seat, my hands trembling at last. I didn't feel magnificent. I felt finished. Julian smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're ready for what comes next." I turned to him, exhausted. "And what's that?" He met my gaze, steady and calm. "Rebuilding," he said. "And this time, you start with yourself." The week after the hearing unfolded like a slow implosion. Everything that had been buried under years of lies began to surface, one headline, one rumor, one whispered truth at a time. By Monday, every business column in the Bay Area carried the same story. Brooks family scandal son, accused of fraud in $2. 4 meters airship case. The article didn't spare details. My name, Mark's name, Vanessa's, all laid out in black and white, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. The photographs from the hearing showed Vanessa's mask cracking, Mark's hollow face, my quiet composure that everyone mistook for victory. But victory is not the absence of pain, it's surviving through it. Calls came nonstop, journalists, old friends, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. I ignored them all. The only sound I could bear was the soft rhythm of rain against the windows, steady as a heartbeat. On the 3rd day, Amelia called. "Vanessa filed a counterclaim," she said, her tone clipped. "Defamation and emotional distress. She's grasping at air. But it's a tactic: stall, smear, exhaust you." I closed my eyes. "Let her try." Amelia hesitated. "There's more." The court investigator finished the custody report. "It's grim." My heart tightened. The children? Neglect confirmed. School attendance irregular. Malnutrition noted. The psychologist reported signs of emotional manipulation. "Evelyn, if you wish, we can file for emergency guardianship." The words hung in the air like a distant bell, terrifying, yet beautiful in their promise. "Yes," I said softly. "Do it." That evening, I received an email, short, desperate, and unsigned. "Mom, please don't take them from me. I'll do anything you ask. Just don't let her win." "Mark." I stared at the screen for a long time. His words trembled with fear. But beneath the fear I sensed something else, the faint echo of conscience finally waking. Julian entered quietly, reading the expression on my face. He wrote, I nodded. Will you answer? I hesitated. Not yet. He needs to sit with what he's done. Julian studied me, then smiled faintly. You're stronger than vengeance now. That's how I know you'll win. The next day, news broke that Vanessa's accounts had been frozen. The luxury car was repossessed. The penthouse they once flaunted as theirs was sealed under court order. Reporters swarmed her outside a downtown cafe. She shoved through them, her mask of composure finally shattered. By evening, her lawyer had withdrawn from the case. By midnight, Ethan Lane, the lover, had disappeared, deleting every social account, leaving behind unpaid bills and a trail of humiliation. Vanessa had built her empire on manipulation. Now she was alone in its ashes, but I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because I knew that sometimes the desperate are the most dangerous. I was proven right the next morning. Julian and I were having breakfast when the intercom buzzed. Mrs. Brooks, the doorman said, voice tense. There's someone insisting to see you. Says it's urgent. Before I could answer, I heard shouting through the receiver, muffled, shrill, furious. Vanessa. Evelyn, she screamed from the lobby. Come down here. You think you can destroy me? You think you can take my children? Julian rose instantly. Stay here. But I didn't. I needed to face her one last time, not as prey, but as equal. When I reached the lobby, she was pacing like a caged animal, eyes wild, makeup smeared, hair unkempt. The security guard hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. Evelyn, she spat when she saw me. You've ruined everything. My marriage, my home, my life. I looked at her, truly looked. The woman who once smirked at me across marble countertops, wearing diamonds I'd unknowingly paid for, now looked hollow, stripped of all the finery that had shielded her cruelty. You ruined yourself, Vanessa, I said quietly. You just needed someone else to blame. You think you've won? She hissed. You haven't. Mark still loves me. He'll come back. The kids need me. I took a step closer, my voice steady. Love, built on lies, isn't love. It's leverage. And as for the children, they need peace, not performance. She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. You'll never get them. I'll drag you down with me before I let that happen. Julian appeared then, his presence calm but commanding. That's enough, Miss Hart. You're trespassing. Security moved in. Vanessa lunged once, pointing a trembling finger at me. You'll die alone, Evelyn. You think this makes you powerful? It just makes you pathetic. I didn't flinch. If solitude is the price of peace, I'll pay it gladly. They escorted her out. Her voice echoed down the corridor like the last cry of something feral, fading into nothing. Later, in the quiet of the penthouse, I sat with Julian by the window. The fog was rolling in again, swallowing the city lights one by one. Does it ever stop? I asked softly. What? The ache, the memories, the ghosts of what should have been. He took my hand. No, but it gets quieter. And one day, you realize the silence isn't emptiness. It's peace. I nodded slowly, my gaze fixed on the dim outline of the bridge. Somewhere beneath that fog, the world was still moving, healing, forgetting. And I would too, because the woman they had broken was gone. What remained was someone reborn sharper, wiser, untouchable. And tomorrow, when the court confirmed guardianship, I would finally do what I had always been meant to do. Protect my family. The courtroom was smaller this time, but heavier. No press, no cameras. Just the judge, the attorneys, and the fragile pieces of what once had been a family. Mark sat at one table, hands clasped tightly, eyes red. Vanessa sat at another, her face pale, the faint bruise of sleeplessness under her eyes concealed poorly with makeup. I took my place beside Amelia. Julian sat behind me, silent, steady, a shadow of quiet strength. The case was simple now. The children, Peter and Lily, innocent souls caught in a storm they never caused. Judge Mendez entered, her robe flowing like a black tide. She adjusted her glasses, scanning the file in front of her. We are here today to determine temporary custody of the minors, Peter Brooks, age 8, and Lily Brooks, age 5. The air felt too thin. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Amelia stood first. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, seeks guardianship not out of vengeance, but necessity. The minor's current environment is unstable. Academic neglect, inconsistent care, and exposure to parental conflict. We have documentation, photos, and school reports to support these claims. She handed over a folder. The judge flipped through it, her expression hardening slightly. Then Vanessa's lawyer, a new one, younger, slick, unseasoned, rose shakily. Your Honor, my client acknowledges recent difficulties but asserts that Mrs. Brooks has been vindictive, seeking to alienate her grandchildren from their parents. The judge arched an eyebrow. Is that an accusation or a statement? He swallowed. An observation, Your Honor. Then observe quietly, she replied dryly. A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. When it was my turn to speak, Amelia gave me a gentle nod. I rose slowly, the wood of the chair creaking beneath me, and walked to the witness stand. My reflection in the plexiglass divider looked older than I remembered, but not weaker. Mrs. Brooks, the judge said, why do you wish to assume custody of your grandchildren? I met her gaze. Because they deserve a home that doesn't use love as a weapon. The judge leaned forward slightly. Explain. I took a deep breath. For years, I watched my son disappear under someone else's control. I watched his children learn that silence was safer than honesty. They saw shouting, deceit, and neglect become normal. They learned fear before trust. I'm not perfect, Your Honor, but I can promise one thing. They'll never go to sleep afraid under my roof. The courtroom was silent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't shout. It simply refuses to hide. Vanessa's lawyer tried to rattle me during cross-examination. Mrs. Brooks, isn't it true you once shouted at my client, saying she'd rot in prison? I said she'd face justice, I corrected, and I still believe that. You see, Your Honor, he said, turning dramatically toward the bench, a vindictive nature. Amelia stood, cutting him off like lightning. A mother's fury isn't vindictive, counselor. It's sacred. Judge Mendez didn't reprimand her. She just nodded once, slowly, as though she understood. Then it was Mark's turn. He looked fragile, smaller somehow, like a man trying to step out from under a lifetime of shadows. He approached the stand, voice trembling. I failed, he began. As a son, as a father, I let her. He gestured toward Vanessa. Turn me against the only person who ever truly loved me. I let her poison my children's hearts and mine. But I see it now. And I want to make it right. Vanessa's head snapped toward him. Mark, he didn't look at her. The kids belong with my mother, at least until I can rebuild myself. They need stability. They need safety. And I can't give them that right now. His words hit the room like thunder. Vanessa lunged up from her seat, shouting, You coward. You think you can just hand them over to her? After everything? Miss Hart, the judge snapped. Sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt. Vanessa froze, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. She's Saturday. But her eyes, those cold, predatory eyes, never left me. The judge took a long pause before speaking, her voice calm but resonant. I've reviewed the evidence. I've listened to the testimony. The children's welfare is paramount. Therefore, temporary guardianship will be awarded to Mrs. Evelyn Brooks. Mr. Brooks will retain visitation rights pending further review. Mrs. Hart is ordered to undergo psychological evaluation and parenting assessment before any contact is reinstated. The gavel struck, and just like that, the room broke open in silence. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing. The world didn't erupt in applause or victory music. It was quiet, steady, real. Because justice doesn't roar. It exhales. As the courtroom emptied, Mark approached me slowly, tears streaking his face. Mom, I don't deserve forgiveness, but thank you for saving them. I looked at him, at the boy who had once fallen asleep on my chest, at the man who had lost his way and found his shame. You'll earn it, I said softly. One day, by being the father they need. He nodded, broken but resolute. Vanessa stormed past us, shoving through the doors, muttering, This isn't over. Maybe she was right. Maybe some storms never truly end. But I no longer cared, because for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility, and somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered what I'd long forgotten. You made it home, Evelyn. 2 weeks after the verdict, my house came alive again. Not with luxury or grandeur, but with the music of small things, the hum of a kettle, the rhythm of a child's laughter, the soft pitter-patter of feet across hardwood floors. Peter and Lily had moved in that Sunday morning. Their suitcases were tiny, their clothes packed neatly by the social worker, who looked relieved to be leaving them somewhere safe. "This place smells like cinnamon," Lily said as she stepped through the door. "That's because I baked muffins," I replied. "And cinnamon always feels like home." Peter, quieter and older in spirit than 8 should allow, looked up at me and asked, "Are we staying for long?" I knelt beside him, smoothing his hair back gently. "As long as you want, maybe forever." His shoulders loosened, and for the first time, he smiled. That first night was quiet but strange. The house, my real house, the one I bought back years ago with what was rightfully mine, was too big for just the 3 of us. The walls held echoes, but not the kind that haunted. They hummed like something remembering life again. After dinner, the children helped me unpack old photo albums. They asked about their grandfather Henry Brooks, whose steady hands had built the life their father once threw away. "Was he kind?" Lily asked. "The kindest," I said softly. "He believed love wasn't about giving everything. It was about giving enough so the other person could still stand on their own." Peter frowned. "Is that what you're doing for Dad?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I suppose it is." At night, after they'd fallen asleep in their freshly painted rooms, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, staring out at the flickering streetlights. The air was cold, but it felt good against my skin. Real, sharp, alive. Julian called around 10. "How's the first night as a grandmother and guardian?" he asked. I smiled. "Exhausting, beautiful, both." He chuckled. "That sounds about right." "Julian," I said quietly, "do you think I did the right thing?" He paused. "You protected the innocent, reclaimed your dignity, and faced down the people who took everything from you. That's as right as it gets." I exhaled slowly, letting his words sink into the space that used to be filled with doubt. "Still," I said, "sometimes I wonder if winning and healing are the same thing." "They're not," he said gently. "Winning is external. Healing is what comes after you stop needing to." The next morning, I awoke to laughter in the kitchen. The sound startled me. I hadn't heard laughter in this house in so long it felt like a foreign language. Peter and Lily stood on stools by the counter, flour everywhere, mixing pancake batter with disastrous enthusiasm. "Grandma, we're making breakfast," Lily announced proudly. I gasped dramatically. "Are you now? What's on the menu?" "Pancakes," Peter said solemnly. "But they might be crunchy." Julian arrived an hour later, bringing fresh fruit and flowers. He looked around the house with quiet satisfaction. "This feels different," he said. "Lighter." "It's alive again," I told him. For a while, I thought I'd buried my heart with my mistakes. Turns out it was just waiting for laughter to wake it. That afternoon, Mark came by. He didn't call first, he just showed up, standing on the porch like a boy afraid of being scolded. He looked thinner, humbler. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, then opened the door. The children ran to him, shouting, "Daddy," and he hugged them tightly, tears spilling down his face. "I missed you," he whispered, "so much." When they ran outside to play, he turned to me. "Mom, I've started therapy, twice a week. I'm working with a financial consultant too. I want to fix what I broke." I said nothing at first. I just looked at him, really looked. His shoulders were less proud, his voice stripped of arrogance. For the first time, he wasn't a man trying to prove himself. He was a son trying to rebuild. "I'm proud of you," I said finally. He blinked, startled. "After everything I did?" "Especially after," I said. "Regret without change is just guilt. But you're changing." He wiped his eyes, nodding. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled faintly. "I did give up, Mark. But then I decided to start over. You can, too." After he left, Julian joined me on the porch again. The sky was painted in orange and violet, the kind of sunset that feels like forgiveness. He reached over and took my hand. "You've done the impossible, Evelyn. You broke a cycle that most families stay trapped in forever." "Maybe," I said, watching the children chase bubbles in the yard. "But I didn't do it alone." Julian smiled. "No one ever does." I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the sounds of laughter, wind, and distant waves fill the silence. For the first time in years, there were no ghosts here. Only roots, and a house with open windows. Autumn came early that year, brushing the city in gold and wind. The mornings were cool, the air tinged with the scent of rain and ripe pears from the neighbor's tree. Life, at last, had found a rhythm again. Peter started 4th grade. Lily learned how to braid her hair. The laughter in the house no longer felt fragile. It rang full, confident, like the walls had finally remembered how to echo joy. Some afternoons, we baked together flower dust in the air, soft jazz from the radio. Other days, we'd walk to the park by the waterfront. Lily would chase pigeons, Peter would sketch boats, and I'd sit on a bench with a notebook, writing down the small miracles that no one else noticed. I didn't call them blessings. I called them returns because everything I'd lost had, in some way, found its way back. Mark visited every Saturday. At first, he came awkwardly, hovering near the doorway like a guest in his own life. But slowly, he began to stay longer, helping with dinner, fixing the back fence, teaching Peter how to ride a bike without fear. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Lily chase fireflies, he turned to me and said, "Mom, I found a small apartment near the bay. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I pay the rent, I cook, I clean, and every night, I think about how you must have done all of that for me without ever complaining." I smiled. Complaining wouldn't have changed anything, but love, real love, always does. He nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "I'm still paying off the restitution. Amelia's keeping me on track. But for the first time in my life, I'm not chasing money. I'm chasing peace." "Then you've already caught the right thing," I said softly. A few weeks later, Julian hosted a small dinner at the foundation to celebrate the success of one of our programs, a scholarship fund for single mothers starting over after financial loss. He insisted I attend. When I arrived, the room glowed with candlelight and laughter. Women of all ages filled the space, strong, vibrant, unstoppable. Many of them hugged me, thanking me for inspiring them, though I'd never spoken to most before. Julian clinked his glass to quiet the crowd. "There are people who build empires," he said, smiling at me, "and there are people who rebuild souls. Evelyn Brooks is both." Applause rose, warm and full. I felt my face flush. For years I'd been invisible, a name on bills, a pair of tired hands in a kitchen. Now I stood under lights that didn't blind me. They revealed me. After the dinner, Julian walked me to my car. "You've done it," he said softly. "Done what?" "Transformed pain into purpose. Most people don't." I smiled faintly. "I didn't plan to. I just refused to stay broken." He touched my hand gently. "That's the same thing." That night, when I came home, the children were asleep on the couch, tangled together under a blanket. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I looked around the room, the framed photos, the warm light, the faint scent of muffins lingering from breakfast, and realized something I hadn't dared believe for years. This wasn't just survival. It was redemption. Everything that had been taken, my home, my dignity, my peace, had returned, but not as it was. Stronger, softer, more mine. I walked to the window and whispered a quiet prayer into the night. Not for vengeance, not even for victory, but for grace. Grace to remember that forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's a path you keep choosing every single day. The wind stirred the curtains gently, as if in answer. And somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. Winter came quietly this time, no storms, no bitterness, only stillness. The city lights shimmered like faraway lanterns, and from my window, the fog rolled in as soft as breath. There were moments when I still woke in the middle of the night, the echo of old voices tugging at the edges of sleep. Mark's shout, the sound of suitcases on wooden stairs, the hollow silence of betrayal. But they no longer owned me. They were memories, not wounds. Ghosts that had learned to knock before entering. Sometimes I'd find myself in the kitchen, standing in front of the same wooden spoon I'd once gripped while washing dishes in Mark's house, the same one I'd nearly thrown away the day he shouted at me. But I didn't throw it away. I kept it not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of survival. I had learned that the difference between scars and shame is the story you tell yourself about them. And mine was no longer tragedy. One cold evening in December, a letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting was neat but trembling. Mark's. "Mom, they approved my new job, assistant operations manager at a logistics firm in Oakland. It's honest work, and for the first time, I'm proud of it. The kids tell me they're happy, and I can see it in their eyes now. You gave them that, you gave me that. I'll never stop trying to be worthy of it. Your son, Mark. I read it twice, my hands shaking slightly. Then I smiled. He was healing. We both were just in different houses, different ways. Christmas morning came with the sound of laughter again. The tree stood in the corner, simple but radiant with handmade ornaments the children had crafted from colored paper. Lily insisted on hanging the angel herself, and when she wobbled on the chair, Peter steadied her without a word. Julian arrived mid-morning, his scarf trailing in the wind, carrying a tray of pastries and a small velvet box. "Presents again?" I teased. "You spoil us." He laughed. "Consider it my job description." Inside the box was a delicate gold pendant, an olive branch, its leaves shimmering with faint green enamel. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "It's more than that," he said softly. "It's a symbol. Peace earned, not given." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I reached up and fastened it around my neck, the metal cool against my skin. That afternoon, Mark joined us for dinner. It was the first time we'd all sat at one table since the day I was thrown out of my own house. But this time, there was no tension, no fear, only the quiet weight of forgiveness. Halfway through the meal, Mark looked up and said, "Mom, do you remember that old oak tree behind the house on Lion Street? The one Dad planted when I was born?" I nodded slowly. "Of course, you used to climb it every summer." "It fell last week," he said softly. "The storm took it down." For a moment, I felt something twist in my chest, grief, nostalgia, maybe both. But then he added, "A nursery came yesterday. They're planting 2 new ones in its place. Peter and Lily helped me choose them." The ache turned to warmth. New roots, new beginnings. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat by the fire, watching the embers glow low and red. The pendant around my neck caught the light, its golden branch flickering like a living thing. I thought of everything that had been lost, and everything that had grown in its wake. Pain had pruned me, yes, but it had also made room for light. And as I sat there, surrounded by silence that no longer frightened me, I whispered the words that had carried me through the darkest nights. "I forgive you. I forgive me." The wind sighed through the open window, carrying the sound away not to erase it, but to seal it. Because forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't about letting go. It's about letting be. Spring crept in gently that year, as if afraid to disturb what had finally settled. The air was cool but kind, carrying the faint sweetness of wisteria from the neighbor's fence. The earth outside the house had begun to bloom again, not the wild, careless growth of years past, but careful renewal, deliberate and steady. It was Peter's idea to start a garden. Dad said Grandpa planted trees when he felt sad. He told me one morning over breakfast. He said it made him feel like he was fixing something. I smiled, stirring my tea. "Then let's fix something too." And so, every afternoon after school, the 3 of us would dig in the soil behind the house, planting basil, thyme, and, at Peter's insistence, a small lemon tree that leaned like it was bowing to the Sunday. Lily named it Hope. One day in early May, Mark came over with a small wooden crate in his hands. "A gift," he said, setting it on the porch. Inside were 4 tiny saplings, their roots wrapped in damp burlap. "Cherry trees," he said, his voice soft. "The same kind that used to bloom outside your old sewing studio." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Memories came flooding back, the gentle hum of my sewing machine, the smell of fabric and soap, the way the morning light had once spilled over the pink blossoms that brushed against my window. "They're perfect," I whispered. Together, we planted them at the edge of the yard. Julian joined us later, bringing shovels, soil, and the laughter that had become part of our family's music. By sunset, the garden was alive with the soft scent of earth and new beginnings. When the last sapling was in place, Peter asked, "Will they grow fast?" "Nothing worth keeping grows fast," Julian said, his hands resting on the shovel. "But once they bloom, they'll never forget how." As the weeks passed, life settled into a quiet kind of peace. The foundation's projects thrived. The scholarship fund expanded to 3 cities. Amelia, ever the sharp warrior, joined our board as legal counsel, trading courtroom chaos for meaningful fights. Julian and I spent our evenings walking by the pier, sharing long silences that didn't need filling. Sometimes, he'd tell me stories about the women his foundation had helped, stories of courage that mirrored my own, though each unique. "You turned your pain into a map," he said one night, as we watched the water shimmer under the moonlight. Now others use it to find their way out. I smiled. Maybe that's all healing really is, becoming a lighthouse for the shipwrecks that follow. One Saturday morning, while pruning the garden, I heard laughter, the kind that bubbles up from somewhere pure. Lily was chasing butterflies, her hands outstretched toward the blossoms that had just begun to open. Peter was helping Mark install a wooden swing on the old oak stump. When it was done, Lily ran to me, tugging at my sleeve. "Grandma, look! Dad says it's for everyone, not just kids." I walked over, touched the smooth wooden seat, and felt tears sting my eyes. "Then I guess I'll have to try it first." They laughed as I sat down, the ropes creaking softly. The breeze lifted my hair as I swung gently forward and back, the world spinning in slow, golden light. Julian stood at the porch, watching, smiling quietly. For the first time in decades, I felt light enough to move with the wind, not against it. That night, as the stars bloomed above the city, I sat in the garden, the scent of lemon and cherry blossoms filling the air. Mark joined me, a cup of coffee in his hand. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if things had gone differently?" he asked. I looked at the trees, their thin branches shimmering silver in the moonlight. "All the time. But then I remember, if things had gone differently, maybe we'd never have learned how to start again." He nodded, quiet. "I'm trying to start too, Mom." "I know," I said softly. "And you're doing better than you think." He smiled, eyes glistening. "I love you." It had been years since I'd heard those words from him. This time, I believed them. When I went inside later that night, I paused by the mirror in the hallway. The woman who looked back at me had silver hair and faint lines around her mouth, but her eyes were alive. Not haunted, not hollow, but bright. I realized, then, that time hadn't taken my beauty, it had redefined it. Because survival had a radiance all its own. By early summer, the garden had transformed into something almost sacred. The lemon tree stood taller now, the cherry saplings bursting with fragile pink blooms that shimmered like silk in the morning light. Every petal felt like a word unspoken, a prayer whispered into the soil and returned as beauty. Peter called it Grandma's orchard of second chances. I didn't correct him. He was right. The children had grown braver since moving here. Laughter came easier, nightmares faded faster. Lily hummed to herself while watering the plants, and Peter spent hours sketching birds that landed on the garden fence. Their joy wasn't loud or wild. It was quiet, honest, earned. That kind of happiness doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from understanding. Mark visited often now. Sometimes he'd come after work, bringing takeout and tired smiles. Other times, he'd arrive early in the morning, helping Peter build birdhouses while Lily braided flowers into his hair. He was learning to be a father again, awkward at first, but present. He didn't hide behind excuses anymore. He showed up, and that, I'd learned, was half of redemption. One afternoon, while we sat under the cherry trees watching the children play, he said quietly, "Mom, do you ever think Dad would have been proud of us?" I looked at him, at the man who had once broken me and was now trying, piece by piece, to rebuild both of us. "Yes," I said, "but not because we did everything right, because we learned how to fix what we broke." He smiled, and for a brief second, I saw the little boy he once was, the one who used to run through the garden barefoot, chasing fireflies. Julian's visits had become part of our lives, now woven into our rhythm, like sunlight through lace. Sometimes he'd bring over books, sometimes pastries, sometimes silence. He'd sit on the porch swing while the children played, his eyes soft and steady, his presence a kind of quiet reassurance that peace could, in fact, last. One evening, after dinner, he stayed behind as the sky turned lavender. The children were inside drawing. Mark had gone home, and the garden glowed faintly with fireflies. Julian handed me a small envelope. "For you," he said. Inside was a deed not to a property, but to the Brooks Foundation for Renewal. The foundation I'd helped him build, now officially bearing my name. "I can't accept this," I said, voice trembling. "Yes, you can," he said gently, "because you earned it. You didn't just survive, Evelyn. You turned your survival into something that saves others, that deserves to be remembered." I looked at him, words failing me. Then I whispered, "You've given me back everything I thought was lost." He shook his head. "No, Evelyn, you gave it back to yourself." That night, after he left, I stood beneath the cherry trees, the moonlight filtering through the blossoms. The air smelled of rain and renewal. I thought about all the women who'd ever been told they were burdens. All the mothers who'd been cast aside, unseen, unheard, and how many of them had fought, quietly, stubbornly, until the world had no choice but to see them again. I whispered into the night, "We're still here." The branches swayed, as if in agreement. Weeks later, on the anniversary of the day I was thrown out, I returned to that old house on Lion Street. Not to reclaim it, to release it. The new owners had painted the walls pale blue. The garden was overgrown. The oak tree that had fallen was gone, replaced by a swing set. I stood at the gate for a long moment, then whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for the lessons, for the breaking, for forcing me to become who I was meant to be." Then I turned away, no tears, no bitterness, just peace. Back home, Lily ran into my arms, shouting, "Grandma, look!" She pointed to the lemon tree, where a single yellow fruit hung, bright and perfect. "Our first harvest." I laughed, pulling her close. "Do you know what that means?" She grinned. "It means it worked." Yes, I thought. It worked. All of it, the pain, the patience, the rebuilding. Because sometimes, the fruit of survival isn't sweetness, it's strength. And that's what lasts. That night, as I sat on the porch with Julian beside me, the children asleep upstairs, I felt the soft hum of the world settling. The garden swayed in the breeze, alive with whispers and roots. Julian looked at me. "Do you realize you've built everything they tried to take from you?" I nodded slowly. "And more." He smiled. "Then you've won." I leaned my head against his shoulder. "No," I said softly. "I've healed." The wind rustled through the blossoms, carrying the scent of lemon and cherry, and earth the scent of beginnings. And as the moonlight spilled over the garden, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself the truth that had taken me a lifetime to earn. I was never broken. I was becoming.